that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey, me, and Tom Fennell, the famous Tom Fennell. Having a good time talking about energy and climate change. Every day I get up, today I was up at about 3 o'clock.
Good for you.
Yeah, aren't I good? It was the cat's doing. Every day I get up early and I look at the news, find the 10 or 15 articles that I find the most interesting and post them to my blog, geoharvey.wordpress.com. And Tom and I get together on Thursday mornings and do the previous week's best of the blog. And so that having been said, perhaps we could just start right in.
Why not?
Okie doke. We start with...
2015 is the warmest year on record.
Yeah, it sure is.
NOAA and NASA.
Yeah, both. Everybody's in agreement on this one. It was last year was the warmest since record keeping began in 1880, according to NOAA and NASA. While many expected 2015 would finish in first place, the margin of victory was startling. Global temperatures were 1.62 degrees Fahrenheit, or 0.90 degrees Celsius above 20th century average, passing the previous record by 20%. And the graph that we have on the screen there is the extent of Arctic ice. That's the North Pole, and it has declined by about 8%.
Not good news for the polar bears.
Not good news for the polar bears, not good news for a lot of people. This is a serious problem, and they are starting to talk about the Gulf Stream slowing down.
Uh-huh. We'll be hitting this from several aspects this week.
This is a problem that, you know, I think Al Gore talked about it in his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, but it could be a serious problem.
This article mentioned that December looked and felt more like March or April.
Yeah.
In most of the Northern Hemisphere,
yeah.
not just America.
I think all of our viewers know what I did on Christmas Eve.
I don't know. At least I forgot.
Let's get back to where we are. I called Senator Inhofe's office in Washington, D.C.
Yes, you did mention that. Yes.
Just for those who haven't heard this, I called his office. There was a recording. Computer answered the phone, and I just said I'd like to leave Senator Inhofe a message. Here it is. We are in Vermont. It is 63 degrees, and I wonder if the senator has a snowball he would send us. This has been a bad year. Some of the ski resorts are down around 50% of their trails being open.
Well, I can believe that. I certainly can believe that. It's been warm, and it's warm right now.
And it's warm right now. That's right. It's
this
going
whole
to be
week
warmer.
is going to be hitting 40 almost every day.
Well, the last report that I saw was we'd hit 50 over the weekend.
Wow.
In Vermont.
They're blaming a lot of this on El Nino.
Yeah.
What is making El Nino so intense?
Yes, that's right. The winter so far, I looked through the data for the days, looking at the coldest temperatures in the Brattleboro area according to the Weather Service, and the lowest temperature we've had all winter was 1 degree, positive 1 degree. We have not hit 0. Now in Brattleboro, we used to get down to 25 below 0.
Yeah, sure.
And I mean 1 degree is not enough to kill a woolly indulgence. It's not enough to kill ticks. It's not enough to prevent.
Which didn't be here in the first place. Didn't used to be here.
Didn't
I speak a well English today.
Yeah. Okay. Do you mind if we just move out of this one? I think we could get stuck on this all day. That came from CNN. Our next item comes from The Guardian. Falling oil prices are driving investments in renewable power in oil-producing countries. With oil at below $30 a barrel, countries such as Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iran, and Kuwait are looking to curb fossil fuel use at home so they can maximize their export profits. And so, what are they doing?
That explains what's going on, because it seems counterproductive here.
They are seeking alternate energy sources for electricity.
So that they can sell their oil.
So they can sell all the oil they've got. What's that going to do? It's going to drive the price of the oil down further. That was from The Guardian. And the next item is related. It comes from Bloomberg. Oil is in free fall. Last year, 42, this is incredible, 42 U.S. companies went bankrupt. These are
U.S. energy companies.
Energy companies. Owing to more than $17 billion, according to a report from law firm Haynes and Boone, the 4 largest U.S. banks have set aside at least $2.5 billion combined to cover souring energy loans and may have to increase that amount. Now,
this came from Bloomberg.
He's got
his finger on the pulse. He knows what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I say he. It's not he, but
well,
it's a company.
There's a serious problem here.
And the assets are selling for far less than the company's own the investors. Owe the investors.
Yeah, and in some case they can't sell them at all because nobody wants them. So
they're sitting there holding assets that no one wants to buy.
Yeah, and you know, again, one thing that we've mentioned several times in the past is that the coal industry is in terrible trouble.
Pretty much worldwide, but especially in the United States.
The Dow Jones Coal Index is off from its highs only 98%. 98%.
It's off 98%.
It's off 98%. It is.
I think that hurts.
Yeah. This is the coal index fell in 2008 faster than the industrial index fell at the beginning of the Great Depression. But it did not start to recover after 3 years. It just kept falling at the same rate, and you know there's practically nothing left. Mm-hmm. And if you invested in oil, you know, one of the things that I've pointed out is if you invested $104,440, which was the price of 1,000 shares, I think that was Arch. No, it wasn't Arch. It was Alpha Natural Resources. If you had invested enough money for a down payment on a spectacular house, today you'd have enough value to buy a modest lunch for 2 at McDonald's. There you go. This is Bloomberg.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Okay. Albany Times-Union provided us with this piece of information. The climate change program, including New York and other northeastern states, won't be enough for the states to reach 2030 goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions unless more is done. The report coincided with the announcement that 2015 was the hottest year on record.
Now they're referring here to the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative,
right,
which does include Vermont.
Right, it does. It includes a couple of states that are really, I think Maryland is one of them.
Maryland is one of them. I think New Jersey just withdrew.
Withdrew, yeah.
For political reasons.
For political reasons, yeah. Climate change isn't happening, of course. Don't have to worry about it. Okay, that was from the Albany Times-Union. From the Beaumont Enterprise, local officials from communities around Vermont are demanding greater say in siting wind and solar energy projects. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns on Wednesday brought local officials and activists from around the state to the State House to express their concerns.
That's Beaumont, Vermont, isn't it?
Beaumont, Vermont, not Beaumont, Texas.
By the way, down there they call it Beaumont.
Beaumont?
Yeah.
I'd never known that.
I've been there. I was corrected.
You were corrected. Okay. I went to Warwick, Massachusetts, having been to Warwick, England. I found out how Warwick was pronounced.
It depends on where you're born.
Yeah.
If you're from Rhode Island, it's Warwick.
Warwick?
But if you're from Connecticut, it's Warwick.
And if you're from Massachusetts, it's Warwick. Warwick.
Warwick. No R.
Okay, Barbara Walters, where are you?
Barbara Walters.
Okay. We are up to Friday, just moving right along, January 22nd, and we have this from CNN. Tens of thousands of seabirds have washed up on the beaches of Alaska's Prince William Sound, an unexplained mass die-off. They are a sign the ecosystem is being troubled by abnormally warm ocean water off the coast of Alaska, in turn a sign that some experts say is related to the changing climate. Tad Montgomery sent me an email when he saw this thing saying, I think that was photoshopped. Yeah, I think it was photoshopped.
Well, it's interesting. It probably wasn't, because...
No, this was photoshopped, I can tell you.
Okay.
Absolutely, I can tell you. The perspective is wrong on those birds. Believe me, I know about
perspective. Well, birds do look like that.
Yeah.
They are called murres.
Yeah.
And they're a species of auk.
Of auk. The murre... The murre is a type of auk.
They inhabit the northern Atlantic and Pacific around the world.
Okay.
But you're not likely to see them in New England, especially now that it's getting warmer.
Right. What happens is when the water warms up, the fish can't survive.
And so they're starving to death.
And so these birds, the fish go away, but the birds have no idea where to go because they're just hunting in the places where they have been. And so thousands, and they say tens of thousands here, but I've read elsewhere that it's probably over
a large number,
100,000. And I chose this picture because I wanted to show the picture of the dead birds on the beach by the thousands was just too depressing.
Yeah, that's in this article.
It is indeed.
It's in the article.
Yeah, that was from
They did
CNN.
mention that the coastal waters in Alaska, where they studied, are 7 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than normal.
7 degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing they call the blob.
The blob?
The blob, yeah. There's a huge area of the North Pacific, which is just south of Alaska, which is a lot warmer than it should be.
Warmer than it should be.
And of course, birds who are accustomed to hunting in a place like that just don't know where to go. Okay. The next item comes from Madison.com. This is
also interesting. It's not Madison, Vermont.
No, it's Madison, Wisconsin. Green Mountain Power in Rutland, Vermont offers an, quote, extreme energy makeover, end quote, that can go as far as customers want in scaling down their energy use, even going off-grid. CEO Mary Powell said. Mary Powell, of course, is a type of super person.
Well, she seems to be. She's pretty competent.
Amazing.
This was a good article, by the way.
Yeah.
If you guys want to look it up, it's very informative about Mary Powell.
Yes.
It's informative about Green Mountain Power.
Yes.
And we're kind of fortunate to have such a utility here.
I would say more than fortunate. Our electric bills are going down.
Yeah.
Because we are relying more and more on renewable energy, which is not a surprise to Mary Powell, but it's a surprise to a lot of people who have been lied to. Oh, did I say that?
There's a quick takeaway from this article. The home makeover program that we just mentioned was featured in New Yorker magazine.
Yes.
And the article described a family of 4 whose 100-year-old home was updated with insulation, heat pumps, LED lights, a small solar array. And as a result of the changes, which are financed through their monthly energy bills, the family used 16% less electricity, and over 3 months, their use of fuel oil fell from 325 gallons to 0.
Yes.
And I've met these people. I've been in their house.
Yeah.
This
is in
Rutland.
The name. It's a Polish name, as I recall.
I don't remember their name, but
I think I wrote an article about them about a year ago.
They gave me a tour of the house, and
yeah.
It's pretty neat.
A young man and his wife and
exactly.
2 daughters.
A couple of young daughters.
Yeah.
And
I wrote an article about them when this thing started out for Green Energy Times, and I forget the name, but I'm not good at names. I'm very sorry to say.
One thing that interests me, I didn't think they were doing this. The heat is provided by air source heat pumps.
Air source heat pumps.
Using outside air.
Yes.
But the hot water is produced by an air source heat pump using the air in the cellar.
Which is a really good idea.
Yeah, it is, because it's warmer.
Yeah, because what happens, not just because it's warmer, because what you're doing is you're taking cold from one place and moving it into another place, or from the other place taking the heat and moving it into the well, they're taking the heat from the basement and moving it into the water heater. When they do that, the area that they're taking from gets cold.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that's actually getting cold is a heat exchanger.
Okay.
And where do you put your heat exchanger? right over your sump. So the sump pump will take the water that drips off and pump it out.
Oh,
so what you've got is not just cheap electric hot water, but the waste that you've got from this is used to dry your basement out.
Second order consequence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Second order consequences
it's amazing
aren't
what
always
you
bad.
can do. Yeah, and heat exchangers, the air source heat pumps, they are cheaper to run, or about as cheap to run as cordwood.
Yes, they are, and it's a very high percentage of the local houses that are being built are being heated that way.
Yes, yeah, very.
The word
high
is spreading through the state that this is a good thing to do.
Right. Okay, our next item comes from the Texas Tribune. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia denied a request from Texas and other states to block President Obama's Clean Power Plan, leaving the climate change rules in place while courts hear the legal challenge. The court wrote that stringent requirements for a stay were not met.
This is all about politics.
It's all about politics.
It really is.
Yeah, they're taking it to the Supreme Court. We've got more news about this. Okay, we're up to Saturday, January 23rd. And what we have here from Newsweek, construction of the world's largest floating solar power plant, set to cover an area of the Yamakura Dam Reservoir the size of 37 football fields, has begun in Japan. The plant, I hope they wouldn't begin it someplace else. The plant, scheduled for completion in March 2018, will generate an estimated 16,170 megawatt hours per year, enough to power approximately 4,970 households.
I love the way they're being precise with imprecise numbers.
Yeah, approximately 16,170 megawatt hours.
Why not just say 16,000?
Or even say over 16.
Over 16,000.
I mean, you know.
This is still very interesting because
sure is.
The article doesn't mention it, but they're saving a lot in evaporation from that reservoir.
Oh, they're also saving electricity.
And they're saving, well, they're generating
They're generating more
Yeah.
electricity.
Yeah.
They're making this more efficient because the solar panels stay cool. And they're more efficient when they're cool.
I mean, this is a win-win-win situation.
It's a win-win-win. And what lives under all those panels? Well, the same fish that live elsewhere. I mean, they aren't obstructing anything, and this is a reservoir here. This is not a natural lake. Not that it really
No,
makes
it's apparently a water power reservoir.
Right.
And there's a takeaway here, not from the Japanese, but the Indian Prime Minister,
Yeah.
who was commenting on this at a conference. The
Yes.
sun god is the soul of all beings. Many in India begin their day with a prayer to the sun. The world must turn to the sun to power the future.
Right.
Interesting quote.
Yeah.
Interesting quote.
Well, there's a lot going on in India, and it's really hard to follow what's going on there.
Well, they're coming from the Stone Age practically in most of India to the 21st century,
Yeah.
and they're doing it real fast.
That's right, they are, and it's not an easy thing for them to do. But they, in addition to everything else, their numbers, instead of being thousands, millions, and billions, are thousands, lakh, and crore. And,
That's
and
very
it's like,
confusing, too.
whoa, is it confusing? You convert a crore rupees to American money and see how your brain feels at the end of that.
What's a crore? It's 100,000, I think.
A lakh, I think, is
10,000
100,000,
or
and
something like that.
a lakh is 100,000, and a crore is 10 million.
10 million.
Yeah, which is, you know, and it's like,
Duh! Why doesn't everybody understand these things?
everybody should understand this. Absolutely, Tom. You know, I mean, what can you say?
You know, I did work with Indians, and they would talk about lakhs and crores all the time.
All the time.
I have no idea what they were
And
talking about.
if you say, what are you talking about? They think, who is this ignorant person? Okay. We are up to Sunday, January 24th.
We still got one more.
We have
here.
one more?
Global solar PV installation.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. From Clean Technica. Global solar PV installation for 2015 increased 34% over 2014 numbers, reaching an estimated 59 gigawatts by the end of the year. This according to preliminary numbers from GTM research published today being probably Friday. GMT expects the United States and China to lead the way toward total installation of 64 gigawatts in 2016.
There's a takeaway here that shows the role of the government.
Oh, yeah.
And it says a decision by the U.S. government to extend the investment tax credit, which just happened, by the way.
Which just happened, yeah.
Showed what an impact government support can have on a market.
Right.
With the U.S. share of expected PV demand between 2015 and 2020 increasing from an average of 10% to 15%.
Right.
Basically just on that announcement.
Just on an announcement, right. And, you know, it's an announcement that has profound importance to the...
Well, the investors are looking at this and saying, you know, I think I'm going to make some money here.
Right. Although I have been seeing more and more reports. They started appearing probably last summer, and I'm seeing them happen more and more often. And what's happening is one country after another is seeing an increase in the amount of solar or wind power happening without government support at all.
Just because it's economically sound.
Just because it's economically sound. And Chile is one of those countries.
This is a new phenomenon, really.
It's a new phenomenon. The price of solar and the price of wind power have gone down so low that they are, without subsidies, lower than coal, than natural gas, than way lower than nuclear.
Yeah.
I should say way lower than coal and nuclear, because they're both priced.
Yeah, natural gas is still giving them a hard time.
Natural gas is a competitor with wind and solar, but the gas prices are low, and you know, it's a bigger investment. It has to take it takes longer to install natural gas. Well, you know, and
solar is going to be getting cheaper.
Right.
Wind is probably going to be getting cheaper.
Wind is probably
we may be going out as far as we can go with wind, but maybe not.
Maybe not.
And we're going to run out of the natural gas. That's a bubble.
Well,
no
yes.
pun intended.
Yes. And we've got serious problems with natural gas. I mean, we've got that
the gas
storage system in California leaking. But you know, one of the things that I read, again, I was writing an article for Green Energy Times, and I came to understand in the course of the article, came across things about gas leaks in Boston. And they said that a Boston University professor and his students had gone through Boston. They had actually traveled every road, 785 miles of road in Boston, streets in Boston, and had found...
Looking for gas leaks.
Looking for gas leaks.
Which I guess you can spot if you got an infrared camera.
They've got the equipment
something
to find
like that.
it.
Yeah.
And they found 3,300 gas leaks.
Wow.
And that Conservation Law Foundation, I think, was the organization that tried to duplicate that. They came up with 4,000.
Well, New York City has a big problem because a lot of the gas lines were installed 1906.
Yeah. I mean,
you know,
and they were, yeah, absolutely.
They're failing.
They're failing.
And there was a pretty big explosion in Harlem a couple of years ago.
Well, I remember
exactly that.
There was an apartment building. I think it was on Manhattan, and it was I think it was like on 8th Avenue or something, and the gas had leaked into the elevator, and the elevator exploded. The entire elevator shaft, which was on the front of the building, so it just blew a hole in the front of the building, the full height of the building, and just blew that into the street.
Wow.
Big bang.
So we could be hearing some more of this.
We will be. I mean, natural gas is a problem, and the government is going after the gas, starting to go after the gas companies. The natural gas is not regulated as closely as it should be by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, now we are up to Sunday, January 24th, and we have this from Laurel Leader Call. Lake Pupo, and I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing that properly because I don't speak Spanish, is more than 12...
That's not a Spanish word.
Oh, isn't it? It's an Indian word?
I guess, because Spanish doesn't have a double O.
Ah, good point. I hadn't known that, but good point. Lake Pupo is more than 12,000 feet above sea level on Bolivia's semi-arid Andean plain. Even though the lake has dried up before, according to experts, this time it will never recover. The recovery is no longer possible. This is a picture of the future of climate change, a glaciologist said. The lake's area averages about 250,000 acres, and those boats that you see there on what had been the shore
they're not going to be floating again in the near future.
They're not going to be floating again ever, because what's happened here is this lake is fed by a glacier, and the glacier is
gone.
100% gone. So it will get annual rainfall and things like that, and the lake has got to the point where it's very salty because the salt has stayed in the water in the area as the water evaporated. So here is this. There were thousands of people living on
Death Valley.
Right. There were thousands of people living on this lake, fishing for a living, and now there's nothing for them to do there. They've almost all moved away.
I read that in the article.
Yeah.
Interesting. The last sentence from this article.
Yes.
It's hard to imagine how many people don't believe in climate change, despite stacking evidence showing its reality. Stacking evidence? Probably a misprint, probably startling.
Yeah, well, he may mean piles of evidence.
Yeah, he could.
But it's all there.
Well, it's an interesting observation.
Yeah, I've heard these people, I think it was Rush Limbaugh, or maybe it was one of the other right-wing people saying.
Well, even if he believes it, he can't admit it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you're back to this business of you can't say something if you're paid not to say it, and your job depends on it. What are you going to do? So, there you are. Anyway, our next item comes from the Tazmania Examiner. That sounds pretty kind of exotic, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Make a noise like a Tasmanian devil.
I don't know how to do that, but I can tell you that if you want to see what Tasmania looks like, you can come to Vermont.
Oh yeah, it looks a lot like Vermont.
The pictures I've seen look a lot like Vermont.
I've seen pictures of Tasmania. It's really quite beautiful.
It's very lovely, and they have apple orchards.
If you're trying to figure out where Tasmania is relative to the rest of Australia,
yeah,
the southeast of Australia is the biggest, the most densely populated. Victoria, it's the seat of government.
Yeah.
They're Washington, D.C. This is an island. Large island.
Big island.
Well, about the size of Maine.
Well,
maybe
it's a
even
state.
Bigger.
The island
is
a state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's about 100 miles offshore.
Yeah. Okay. This is the item from the Tasmania Examiner. A broken submarine cable and a drought have left Tasmania with electric supply problems. Stakeholders point out that Tasmania is one of the best places in the world to harvest wind, hydro, and solar energy. The environment minister said the government would consider adding renewable power.
Well, this is kind of crazy. They're out there. They got wonderful renewable resources.
Yeah.
And they're not using them. They're
not using them.
They're getting powered by a cable from land.
Yeah.
Which broke.
And it supplied them with 40% of their electricity.
Was it 40%?
40% of the electricity for the whole state came through one
I would gather
cable.
That, number one, they will fix that cable.
Yeah,
and number two, in about 10 years, it's going to be putting power the other way.
Well, that may happen, but what this makes me think of is the cable that they're talking about bringing from Iceland to the UK.
Yeah, that's pretty long.
What happens when that breaks? The energy policies in the UK are crazy, and we're starting to see that play out, I think. Anyway, should we proceed?
We can move on, yeah.
Okay. This week, this is from
back to Vermont.
Vermont Public Radio. This week, voters in the village of Hyde Park and the town of Stowe each approved building community-based solar projects. Once online, the projects will help the small municipal electric departments meet with the new renewable energy standards Vermont passed into law last year. There is a picture of Hyde Park.
Yeah. Now, both Stowe, as a town, and Hyde Park are relatively small towns.
Yeah, they're not all that big.
They're about 15 miles apart. They're not contiguous.
Okay.
But they're up there in the high mountain country.
Yeah.
On Route 100, and it's real pretty up that way.
It is. It is very pretty up there. And, You know, this puts me in mind. We talked earlier about this movement for community action on community control on siting.
Yeah.
That is really very clearly a movement to prevent siting of large renewable energy projects.
I was thinking about that as reading the article.
Yeah.
You know, there's people support this, but they're not very vocal about it.
Right.
The people who oppose it are. They're making an awful lot of noise.
Supporting and opposing.
To promote their agenda.
Yeah, the people who support renewable power are not being loud, but the people who are opposed
Exactly.
to it are.
Exactly.
And what's happened is there are a lot of people who are involved in trying to get community control in Vermont.
I have no objection to that in theory.
In principle.
But it's going to be co-opted by this loudmouth group.
Absolutely. And
that's what that's all about, really.
That's what it's all about. And that group can move from one town to another, and it can
and
just
from one state to another.
Keep its activities going. And they talk about big wind. This is something that I find really interesting.
Well, all wind is big wind.
Yeah, all wind is big wind. They talk about big wind, and when I first heard that, I thought to myself, what is big wind? And I started looking when I'm doing my blog for anything that had to do with wind, and big wind, the size of wind, wind power was one item that I was trying to keep the human health effects of wind, the property value effects of wind. Deaths of birds and bats, the price of wind power, that whole thing. And what I discovered about big wind is two projections that came up in the last year saying that by 2016, 2017, that period, wind turbine sales worldwide would hit $95 billion a year.
That's significant.
Annual. Yeah.
Some of them are still being made in America.
Yeah, except, and in fact, one of the best wind turbine manufacturers in the world is here in Vermont. Northern Power Systems, it's in Barrie, I think.
In Barrie.
Except, $95 billion sounds like a lot of money, but there are 21 oil and gas companies that make more than $100 billion, I should say their revenues are upwards of $100 billion each. So
61.
21 out of 63 of the large companies in the world. And those 21 companies, every one of which, plus Koch Industries, which is not one of them, every one of those companies is bigger than the entire wind turbine manufacturing system. And I'm skipping back here. I want to go back to Stowe. So what is big wind? It's David facing an army of Goliaths. That's what it is. Yeah. And these people are helping maintain the fossil fuel industry, which is killing them.
Yeah.
I mean, the fossil fuel industry, air pollution, according to the World Health Organization, kills 10,000 people every day worldwide. That's air pollution from the fossil fuels industry.
Well, as we've mentioned on the show, there is such a thing as wind turbine syndrome. And people are getting sick.
Yeah.
But it's not the turbines that are making them sick, it's their response to the turbines.
You know, I'll tell you something, Tom. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about responding to turbines and placebo effects. I was riding my bike here in Brattleboro. I don't have a car. I was riding a bike, and I saw a child up, 100 feet in front of me, and he fell over, lost control, fell over, came down on his knee and his elbow. And I immediately felt a very real pain.
Did you?
I won't tell you where, because we're on television, but I did feel a very real pain.
Yeah, I can understand that. I have felt similarly at times.
I got an email from an anti-wind group, which some person had put me on their Facebook page as a friend of their group, without asking my consent. And I got this email, and I went to the thing, and here was a picture of a bird being killed by a wind turbine. It gave me the same pain.
Okay.
I mean, this is a very real pain. And if I were clobbered by that constant kind of, this is what it's gonna do. It's gonna kill the birds. It's gonna make you sick.
It's easy to fall for that.
Yeah, and after a while, I know I would just, every time I saw a picture of a wind turbine, I'd get sick.
Well, I'm reminded of an analogous situation in Wardsboro.
Yeah.
We had a group of neighbors that got together to put a community television system in.
Yeah.
Because Wardsboro is in
I've heard
it's
this
in a
though.
valley.
The people on this show should hear this. Yes, go ahead.
You can't get TV in Wardsboro. You know, it's
Yeah.
surrounded by mountains. So we put in this dish system.
Yeah.
And here's this, we bought the dish, we installed the dish. No sooner was the dish set up in the field than this lady started complaining about sickness.
Yes.
And I have no doubt she wasn't sick. She was sick.
She was sick.
Having trouble sleeping. She was getting all sorts of
Yep.
pains. But the dish hadn't been connected to anything. It was just a big piece of plastic sitting out there in the field. But she was convinced radiation was getting her.
Yeah, I feel sorry for her. There's nothing that you can do to fix that because even if you take the dish away, she hasn't changed, her environment hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And
But I mean, it's just an analogous situation,
Yes, that's right.
how your mind can play tricks on you.
your mind can play tricks on you. And I am not blaming the victim. If I say this is what's happening, I'm blaming the perpetrator, and the perpetrator is the person who goes in and says, "You're going to get sick. You're going to get sick."
Yeah, you got it.
The property values are going to go down, which
doesn't seem to be happening at all.
the studies that I've seen, which are very responsible, objective studies, and they will say that's not objective. It's based on subjective data.
And we talked about it on this show about a guy up in Michigan who's running tours to the area where the turbines are.
Yes. Okay. I think we should get going.
Moving right along.
Yeah, that's right.
Back to
Okay.
Greenland. Oh, this is a very interesting story.
A new study
Very
found that
interesting.
melting Greenland ice.
Let's get that picture
Let's get
up
that
here.
picture up.
Yeah, this is
The melting Greenland ice sheet might affect a key aspect of global ocean circulation, which in turn could drive changes in the Earth's climate. It is the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. It is a massive ocean current that's critical to the stability of the climate. I want to point out, excuse me, that North Atlantic current that you see there is the Gulf Stream.
Yes, I was just going to mention that. If you look at the red end, just attached to that,
Right.
is what we traditionally call the Gulf Stream.
Right, and
so this is starting in Florida.
Right, and what's happening here is they have very cold water coming off the Greenland ice shelf. And that very cold water, because it is fresh water,
And it's coming from melt.
right, runs on top of the
Right,
salt
the salt
water.
water.
They don't mix well.
Right.
So they will mix eventually, but they don't mix well. And that cold water will eventually overrun the Gulf Stream, meaning that the Gulf Stream will no longer give its warmth to the air above it. And that means that, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, England, Norway, France, Germany, you name it, in northern
They could be getting pretty
northwestern-
cold.
They will start getting cold the way their latitude indicates they would. And just
Well, they're way up there parallel with Newfoundland.
just look at that map. What is across the water from Norway? Northern Greenland. What is across the water from Ireland?
Newfoundland.
We're talking about Newfoundland,
Yeah.
and that's cold.
Yes, it is.
We're talking about people who live in uninsulated houses here. We're talking about people who
A lot of these houses don't even have central heat.
Yeah, when I lived in England, we didn't know anybody but one family that had central heat. And that family, the man said, my house, I can keep the whole house at 50 degrees. And, my father said, the rosy red cheeks of the little children, the reason why they're rosy red is because the nursery's at 44 degrees. Okay. That, by the way, came from Newsweek, and probably worth looking at. Our next item.
Yeah, it's an in-depth study of
It
this
is.
phenomenon.
Yes.
Here. If you're feeling
Yeah.
technical,
And
look
and
it
you know
up.
the climate deniers, and it's interesting to me that there are more climate deniers running for president of the United States in that pack than there are in the 70,000 climate scientists who published. This is a crazy situation. Okay.
Forgive me if I'm not laughing at you, and I'm really not laughing.
You're
out of-
allowed to laugh at me.
Yeah, I know, but
what can I say?
This is really kind of sad.
It's
not a
it is
laughing matter at
appalling
all.
how stupid people are. I shouldn't say that. I'm stupid myself. Anyway, our next item
next
comes
one
from
tries to address this.
Yes, it does, and I actually put this in there because I thought it was an important thing to counterbalance that last thing, which does suggest that in the entire area of northwestern Europe could be closed down, and we'd have to evacuate a large part of the population of the UK, probably bringing them to the United States, where they might displace some of the Muslims who have been coming in. And Donald Trump would probably prefer Scottish people to Muslims. Nah, he's mad at Scottish people because they put in wind turbines. Okay, it won't work. Okay, this is from the Alaska Dispatch News. Some researchers suggest northern sea ice can bounce back and continue its role as the refrigerator of the world. One has shared a vision of restoring sea ice at the fall meeting of the American Geophysical Union in San Francisco last month. More than 20,000 scientists attended the week-long meeting.
The takeaway from this one is some models say the Arctic Ocean will be almost ice-free during summer as soon as 2030 to 2040. Well, there's already ships making the trip over the poles in the summertime.
Which was an absolutely outrageous idea.
Well, 100 years ago when people were doing it, they were getting stuck in the ice and dying.
That's right. And, I remember when the first Transarctic tanker was built, which was actually longer ago than you would imagine. But
this was like an icebreaker tanker.
This is an icebreaker tanker, yeah. And I don't think it was all that good an idea when it was done, but they pointed out that they could save a lot of money going through the Arctic. But this is going to become very common. As you said, they are doing it now.
They're doing it already.
Yeah. Okay. Our next item comes from Renew Economy. The minister responsible for Germany's electric transition from coal and nuclear to renewables says solar and wind energy have already won the technology race. He said Germany's task now is to focus on integration, digitizing the grid, and on storage, efficiency, transport, and building and industrial heat.
Well, from this article, I never looked at it from this perspective, but this energy vendor was somewhat of a pilot program. They were trying to learn what worked, what didn't work.
Yeah. And
they're finding out that the renewables are working much better than they expected.
Much better, and our next item speaks to that. So maybe we should talk. We should put that one up. Do you want to do that?
We got a nice picture here.
Okay, this is from Tuesday, January 26th. Nice picture. I've seen this picture used to illustrate all kinds of articles online that cover all kinds of things that have to do with batteries. But if you look at those things that look like
batteries,
trailers to be hauled by tractors, they are batteries, and there's a bunch of them there.
And they're right next to the windmills.
They're right next to the windmills. Energy storage.
Where is that? Do you know?
Well, that's a sandia.gov photo.
Yeah, we know that.
Which means it's in the United States, and I'm not sure where it is, to tell you the truth. Energy storage costs could decrease up to 70% in the next 15 years, according to a report, e-storage shifting the cost from cost to value. The report also explains a number of previously unquantified values of energy storage, such as improved grid reliability and predictability of generation needs.
We don't think about this
Technica. Yeah.
We just think of the dollars, but these are valuable too.
These are valuable too. And basically, the thing about this in the energy venda is one other piece of information, which we had on the show. I believe it was last week, might have been the week before.
Yeah, it was very recently.
The German grid operator said they could absorb 70% of the grid being from wind and solar without storage. A battery. And here you're saying, okay, here's a bunch of batteries, guys. And I want to point out that if there's 70% wind and solar, that 30% that remains, some of that is going to be hydro.
Yes.
And some of that, in fact, a much larger amount than I think people realize, is going to be from biodigesters.
Yes.
We talk about this a lot. Those biodigesters are commonly used now in Germany to deal with manure on farms, but they can deal with food waste from all kinds of from the people's kitchens, from restaurants, from hotels, from food distribution places like markets and wholesalers. There's a lot of food waste. They can deal with municipal waste. All of this stuff has been stuff that in the past somebody had to pay to get rid of.
Bingo. You're reading my mind.
And all of a sudden, you can make electricity with it, and it makes a lot of electricity.
And it makes money.
Renews. The UK faces a 40 to 55% electricity supply gap if the government implements its plans to close all coal-fired and stations by 2025 on top of retiring aging nuclear power stations, according to the Institution of Mechanical Engineers. It is unrealistic to fill that gap by building gas or nuclear plants. Now, it may be...
That's a very interesting statement.
Yes, it may be possible to fill the gap with renewable power.
Uh-huh.
So, anyway...
There's 3 recommendations that the mechanical engineers came up with.
Yeah.
1, reduce the demand on the electricity system.
Well...
So that's efficiency.
Efficiency,
Okay.
yes.
2, implement the changes necessary across the industry and supply chain to deliver security of electric supply with no coal.
There you go.
Now that's a mouthful right there.
Yes.
And finally, review the capacity in the supply chains to deliver the construction of the most likely new power infrastructure.
And what do you suppose that is?
Well, it's going to be different kinds of
It's gonna be
cables,
different.
really.
Yeah.
High voltage DC transmission.
Yeah. There's a lot going on there.
There's an awful lot going on.
We will refer back to this item when we get to our last item.
Okay.
We only have...
Well, in 100 years, the electricity system is going to resemble this about as much as a Stanley steamer resembles a modern car.
Yeah. I knew a guy once who had a Stanley steamer.
Oh, yeah?
He loved it.
I bet.
He said it was a wonderful car. It was almost perfect in every respect. The only thing is...
Didn't have a roof.
No, I think it did. It was a late model, but it seems to me that he said that it took about 30 seconds once you turned the flame on. It took about 30
It was that quick, huh?
30 seconds before you could move and about 3 minutes before you could go full speed. I said, "What's full speed?" He said, "Nobody knows." Okay, this is from Hinkley, Bhutan's national newspaper. Bhutan is now generating electricity using wind power in addition to water. Wind-powered electricity is provided for over 300 houses, with the inauguration of 2 300-kilowatt wind turbines in Rubesa, Wangdu. Again, I don't speak Bhutanese. I don't know how that's supposed to be pronounced. The Asian Development Bank provided a grant of $2.7 million.
Now, Bhutan is a very interesting country.
Yeah.
The king, or whatever he calls himself, of Bhutan, is very benevolent.
Yes.
And their country doesn't talk about gross national product. It talks about gross national happiness.
Yeah.
What a concept.
What a concept. We should do that here. One of the things that's interesting about that is my understanding is, and I could be wrong, this particular village did not have electricity.
I think you're right.
And getting electricity to this village was going to be an expensive problem. So they were able to get electricity. And I also want people to notice these wind turbines are very close to those buildings. But I don't think they're as close as the wind turbine at the Greensburg, Kansas, at the Kiowa County Hospital in Greensburg, Kansas.
Well, they're awful close to it from this picture.
Yeah, they look close. It's hard to tell really because the bottoms of the mast could be slightly down the hill from, but you know, well, there we've got it. I love these things that come from other countries sometimes.
Yeah, just to mention it, Bhutan is up in the Himalayas.
It's up in the Himalayas.
North of India, next to Nepal, and it's beautiful country.
Bordering on China, isn't it?
I believe so, yeah. To the north.
China, India, Sikkim, I think is up there.
Up there.
Yeah. Okay, our next item from Scientific American. Switch to clean energy can be fast and cheap. This is amazing. Even when optimizing to cut costs and limiting themselves to existing technology, scientists showed that renewables can meet energy demands and slash carbon dioxide emissions from the electricity sector by 80% below 1990 levels while saving money.
Well, the first sentence I got here says wind and sunshine could power most of the United States by 2030 without raising electricity prices.
Yeah, well, I think we had kind of had that in mind here, hadn't we? They're saying close to 80%, and that's by what,
2030.
30. And basically what happens is a lot of people don't understand what's going on. But the cost of wind power, the cost of solar power are down so low that really there isn't any reason to build anything else right now, aside from other renewable resources.
Well, this article indicates something that it's a duh kind of moment.
Yeah.
They're criticizing both solar and wind because they're intermittent.
Yes.
And what this thing is saying, if the sun might not be shining over here, but it's shining over here.
You got transmission lines.
And you got transmission lines. And however, over larger geographic regions, weather tends to average out.
Yes.
So spreading out renewables and channeling electricity accordingly could better smooth over peaks and valleys in electricity output.
Right.
So it's just a different way of looking at the darn thing.
And one of the things, you know, we talk about energy, and one of the things that we really focus on a lot is electrical power. But cars burn gasoline or diesel or biodiesel maybe or biogas. They can burn ammonia, and you can manufacture ammonia anywhere in the world if you happen to have renewable power to make it with.
Yeah.
So
just an ordinary internal combustion car.
Just an ordinary internal combustion car. In Belgium.
Ammonia, by the way, isn't that stuff you buy in a bottle and use in a laundry.
No, it's not that. Don't try pouring that in your gas tank. Ammonia is it's a pretty nasty chemical, but
yes, it is.
Interestingly, it
doesn't smell very good.
Doesn't smell good. I've worked with it industrially, and it's anyway. Ammonia is corrosive and it's problematical, except that it happens to be easy to control relative to gases.
Hydrogen.
Methane, certainly relative to hydrogen, is awful. The hydrogen will go right through steel. How can that happen? How can it happen? People don't believe it. They really don't. But it does go right through steel. And, you know, I had a chemistry teacher when I was in high school. It took me years to figure this out, who said, well, we're going to do an experiment today involving hydrogen. And he said, I've got a bottle of hydrogen back. And then he went and got the bottle of hydrogen and he hooked it up and he opened the valve and he said, nothing happening. Ah, yes, it probably lost all its hydrogen because it'll go right through steel. And this guy was really good at getting people to focus on what he knew.
It was.
He knew. He absolutely knew. I remember when he was.
Good way to put it, because you remember that, didn't you?
Yeah, I remember when he said, I want to show you what happens about white phosphorus. It will ignite all by itself. He said, we've got it in here in a little bit of alcohol to keep it from igniting, so we'll take just a tiny bit of it and put it on this piece of paper. And I don't want the paper to burst into flame on the top of this table here, so I'll put it on top of this graduate. So the thing was on top of this liter graduate. And of course, after a while, you start seeing smoke come up. Well, the alcohol that was evaporating was going into the air, but it was also going down into the graduate. So when this thing, when the thing caught fire, it went boom. And of course, it was a way of waking a class up.
Yep.
So what can you say? All right. That was Scientific American. Now we have Central Somerset Gazette, and this is Somerset, where the cider apples grow in the southwest corner of the UK and just a couple of miles from where I used to live.
Ah,
yeah.
And it's not Somerset, Vermont.
Beautiful countryside. I lived in Devon. I didn't live in Somerset, but I lived in agricultural country in Devon. I loved that area. The Hinkley Point nuclear plant could be delayed after EDF postponed today's meeting, where the company was due to finally decide whether to invest. The decision to invest in Britain's first new nuclear plant in decades has been put off due to funding difficulties.
Now, let me mention this EDF, because I was wondering who the heck they were.
Yeah.
It's Électricité de France. And it's a utility, mostly owned by the government.
Huge company.
Very, very large utility.
Yeah.
And they had hooked up with some Chinese investors and were, at least up until this article, thinking seriously about investing a lot of money in this Hinkley Point.
Yep.
And they seem to be having second thoughts about it.
Second thoughts. There's a little thing that's going on here. The union for EDF is profoundly opposed to building that plant.
The workers' union?
The workers' union.
Is that so? You
Yes.
would figure it makes jobs, right?
They're afraid it's going to drive EDF out of business because the investment is so big. We're talking about an investment.
It's a huge investment.
Huge investment. Almost $30 billion. And the thing that there were $30 billion or 30 billion pounds.
I don't even know.
It doesn't matter.
It's more than I have.
What they're worried about is that EDF could go broke.
Yeah.
And their retirement fund owns much of EDF.
Yep. Now it's starting to make sense.
Yeah. So they're saying, I don't know that we really want to do this anymore. We might find something else we want to do. And it's a problem for them. It's a problem for them, and of course we're back to this thing being a problem for the UK because of what we just read, which was as they're closing down their coal plants by 2025, they also have to close down their nuclear plants because the nuclear plants are going to get old. And of course you've got a government which is saying, no, we don't want onshore wind. No, we don't want rooftop solar. They are literally saying, we don't want rooftop solar. You know, here in Vermont, you got people.
How can they say that? I mean, isn't that an infringement on your liberty or something?
Oh, you're allowed to put the rooftop solar up. And, you know, like in the anti-solar movement in New Mexico, they're talking about a $100 a month connect fee if you have a solar panel on your roof.
That's
this is the utility. Bill. Yeah, the utilities flexing their muscles. Anyway,
well, we've talked about this this Hinkley plant before.
Many
times.
And
the biggest thing that baffles me is they're talking about selling the power at about 3 times what it's worth.
Yeah. They have to have a guaranteed...
Just to make this thing financially viable.
Yep. They have to have a guaranteed wholesale price of that power that is about twice the retail price that it will sell for eventually. So who's going to make up the difference for that? The taxpayer.
Or the ratepayer. The same people.
Yeah, it's folly. And when you compare the price of, all right, I was saying Lazard earlier. Lazard, coal power a little over 11 cents per kilowatt hour wholesale, nuclear power a little over 10 cents per kilowatt hour, natural gas a little over 5 cents, solar, some types a little over 5 cents, some types, a little over 6 cents for natural gas. Some types of solar a little over 6, some a little over 5. Solar power, Lazard is saying, is going to be cheaper within a year than natural gas, and wind power has already passed natural gas.
Some of the solar thermal is already
and
selling 3 cents.
Yeah, these
1.5 cents I saw.
Yeah, but these are all unsubsidized prices. This is the levelized cost. The subsidies have been taken into account in building the price. So, time to leave.
I guess so. This is the last article we're talking about.
Yep, that's right. So we'll say goodbye.
I'm going to push this picture back up.
Goodbye, ladies and gentlemen.
I like that picture.
Yes. Goodbye, ladies and gentlemen, and we hope you will tune in next time.
Goodbye, people.
Bye-bye.
I wanna hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.